The video contains minor spoilers. You have been warned.
プラネタリウムはいかがでしょう。どんな時も決して消えることのない美しい無休のきらめき。満天の星々が皆様をお待ちしています。プラネタリウムはいかがでしょう。
何？
あらあら。
In a post-apocalyptic world where humanity is nearly extinct, AI machines hunting down the remaining survivors, and a toxic rain that falls endlessly, people called junkers scavenge what they could find from ruins in order to survive. One such scavenger, who is the protagonist, was plundering in an area called the Sarcophagus City, where he found an abandoned planetarium. And in that planetarium stood a robot girl called Hoshino Yumemi, who greeted the MC and assumed that he was her first customer she's had in a long time. Being a robot that was tasked to the planetarium, she was obligated to show the MC the stars. And so begins a short story that just revolves around these two characters. As mentioned, this VN is short. How short? Less than 1 minute.
Bruh.
Okay, my actual playtime is 2.6 hours. I don't know how long that is in hours and minutes. I will let Ake know and the future me to convert it since I'm lazy. But since we're on the topic, I wonder why the VN Manager program didn't record the playtime. I set it up as usual like the other VNs, but it didn't record, which is weird. So for you guys that use this app, hope you guys can help me out. By the way, VNDB's average playtime recorded was around 4 hours. As I've said in the synopsis, this VN is a story about these two characters. So there's just one section for them when compared to my usual main and side character sections. The usually cynical but also kind protagonist and the kawaii and talkative robot girl. Okay, so the protagonist is apparently nameless, but the story does address him as the Junker. However, I don't really familiarize him with that name due to another way of addressing him as frequently said by the robot girl, which is... So yeah, I just know him more as Okyaku-sama. Anyway, the Junker, or Kuzuya in Japanese, is a cautious and careful person, which should be normal given the setting of the story. You could say that he has a tough personality to adapt to the rough conditions of his surroundings. However, Kuzuya is not heartless, and he does get kind and engaging when the situation allows it. He also has a thing for cigarettes and alcohol, and being a junker, he tries to search the ruins for these two commodities, which are a rarity in their current world. By the way, the protagonist is voiced by the chat Jojo himself, Ono Daisuke. Yes. Next, we have Hoshino Yumemi, the cute robot girl. Since she is a robot made to usher in customers into the planetarium, Yumemi is a very cheerful and friendly character. I mean, yeah, looking like an innocent young girl, I would make a complaint against the manufacturers if she wasn't. Though she is quite talkative, which might annoy some people, especially in this current setting, but I don't blame that on her because that allows her to be approached easier, especially by children. Yumemi is also very protective towards humans, and she will ensure that their safety comes as top priority. Her protectiveness could even be persistent that she is willing to ignore critical directives. Let's say, for example, ignoring a human's order. In addition to her serving humans, she also takes great joy in helping them as well, expressing her happiness when she could assist people. And if she couldn't, she'll direct them to those that can, which is in vain due to the current situation since it's been 30 years after the world's turned to shit. Surprisingly, Yumemi is not aware of the fact because she is slightly damaged. Another surprising fact to me is her seiyuu, Suzuki Keiko. What the fuck? By the way, there are other characters, but they're like really minor since they're nameless as well, and they don't even have sprites or CGs to show them. Still, they do affect the plot considerably since that's what their job is. And well, if you want to know more about them, just go play the damn game. Now, this is one of those classic VNs at which the settings could be accessed by the right mouse click, where you could enable the auto mode, access screen mode, sound settings, voice settings, Oof, even a VN with only 2 major characters couldn't escape this curse. Font settings and character rate, which is basically the speed of the text appearing. And finally, the auto mode settings. As for the main menu page itself, it's clean AF, and you could only get access to the music mode and CG mode after completing the story. Now in game, the UI is kinda like the usual, an ADV type with the scene shown here, text here, and the buttons on the bottom. Most of the story will be told like this, and only critical moments that have CGs will be shown full screen, which I think is effective. Besides that, Yumemi's sprite is shown here, which takes up nearly half the screen, and I don't mind that because she's the focus of the story, and it just shows her cuteness more. Gotta give credit to Key for thinking that we readers wanna pay attention to a kawaii robot girl more. And speaking of attention, if you notice her sprite, which has those ribbons behind her, they change in color depending on her mood. The little attention to details like this made me appreciate the developers even more. After that, the CGs and OSTs are up to standard, so I don't really need to talk about them, but what I want to give praise on is Yumemi Seiyu. I think she does a really damn well job portraying an innocent and friendly robot with ideal human qualities. As for the translation, I did encounter one mistake, which was I had chosen N composite armor piercing whatever, but putting that aside, no problems with the translation overall. This VN is a kinetic novel, meaning that it has a linear plot without any choices, so just enjoy the ride and keep pressing the enter button or left click or whatever platform that you're using. And that's it. I don't know what else to say in this section, lol. Now get ready for corny statements, but I'll be upfront. This kind of story really resonates with me. It's sci-fi, it's dystopic, it's grim. But there is that small light at the end of the tunnel represented through Yumemi, a robot that just wants to show you the stars. Quite symbolic really, as stars are the ones shining in the darkness of space. Just goes to show that there is hope despite being in a post-apocalyptic world. I find it to be really nice when it coincides with the MC, seeing that it was in his interest to look at the stars but could no longer do it due to the constant rain that is toxic. As a result, it will be completely normal to not even look up anymore since the weather is that bad, which is shown in the VN to be always cloudy and gloomy. But that interest seems to be reignited from his encounter with Yumemi. And again, ironic because the MC's human desire would be reawakened by a non-human character. Besides that, some scenes will feel repetitive, but I think that it works in this kind of story. There are also several key elements that might feel unimportant, but they all make sense in the end. Those elements and repetitions are a great method to contribute to the build-up leading towards the climax of the plot, given the right setting and the right storytelling. And speaking of storytelling, the editing of the music and the transitions between scenes were also great and smooth. There were some scenes that didn't have music, but in this case, I believe that it worked according to the situations presented. And compared to my previous experience of Fault Milestone 1, to which I addressed in my last video, this became a breath of fresh air. Overall, I don't have any major problems with the story. The plot's deep enough, the character interaction is good, the pacing as well, and it gave a suitable ending in my opinion. And speaking of opinions, let's move on to the next section. I had to think for quite a while in order to find the things that I don't like in this VN. And it was difficult. Though honestly, I think there would be just one that is kind of serious regarding Yumemi's light ribbon, which is a really good thing most of the time. But there is one moment I think that it did not fit. What I mean by that is that there was one point when she tried to show the MC the stars, but her light ribbon glowed maintenance mode, which is weird to me because there were no problems whatsoever, but her light ribbon was glowing that particular mode, and I was just like, huh? That being said, her ribbon is one of the things that I adore most when reading this VN. The fact that it changes according to her mood and the situation is just so nice to look at. I also like that the story gave me some surprising moments despite those moments being short. In these particular scenes, I went like, yo, what the hell? Then I thought that the MC was an asshole, but looking back, it's kind of, his actions were kind of understandable considering the situation he's in. But now I'm gonna talk about some neutral stuff which could be added to the story but isn't really necessary since it doesn't affect the plot, and in most cases would be better left alone. One such thing is the other side characters, since they don't have sprites and they are nameless, which I find to be okay since they simultaneously matter and don't, meaning that they matter just enough to affect the characters but not enough to play a bigger role in the story. Lastly, I want to give my thoughts about the ending, so if you guys haven't finished it, please do skip to this timestamp for the next section before you get spanked by Akino.
あらあら
Okay, so for the ending, it falls under the neutral stuff category for me. I'm completely fine with the way it ended, despite it leaving no answers to what happened afterwards. I personally am okay with that because it lets me decide for myself and imagine how the after story would turn out. Yes, it might be nice to give a firm ending, but I think that I like how the way it ended. The moments leading up to it gave you enough info to determine its fate, but not too much to not leave it hanging unnecessarily. But I'm curious how you guys would feel about it, so why don't you guys share with me? Not in the YT comments, of course, but in Discord, so you can avoid spoiling people. Still, I love the idea of the toxic rain that was repeated several times throughout the story to be deadly, and that rain was used as Yumemi's tears because she couldn't cry. Another ironic thing, toxic tears coming out from a pure and innocent robot. There are two anime adaptations for this VN, one of which is an ONA that has 5 episodes, while the other is a movie that is around 2 hours long. I've watched both, and basically the ONA is the adaptation of the VN with some added and missing scenes, while the movie is like a sequel with the ONA added as flashbacks. So I won't talk about the movie because I just want to compare with the adaptation that was made for the VN story only. Overall, I think that the anime adaptation is quite okay, so I thank David Productions for not f***ing it up. But of course, it has some problems. Firstly, I think some scenes were altered unnecessarily, like the atmosphere in the planetarium. In the VN, it was dark and gloomy. It felt abandoned. But in the anime, it was bright AF. Doesn't look abandoned to me. Just felt like a weekday when no one was interested to go to the planetarium. I think it's better in the VN because the dark atmosphere gave more focus to Yumemi, the light at the end of the tunnel, as I've mentioned. Besides that, a scene regarding the rain. I mean, it's toxic and was emphasized a lot during the VN to be deadly, so the protagonist would cover himself with his cloak. But in the anime, his head is out in open. I was confused. Like, what the hell? Does the rain not sting you? But then I found out why. They didn't mention about the rain in the anime adaptation, if I recall correctly. I was like, oh my god, why? That played a big-ass role in the climax. What the f***? And honestly speaking, the anime adaptation didn't make me feel as emotional when compared to the VN. That being said, the adaptation itself is not bad. I like its visuals, and since it's David Productions, I have no complaints. I also appreciate that the adaptation gave a bit more of an opening in the first episode, where he was shown being chased by the Menschenjäger, or human hunters in English, which are rogue AI and scenes that led him to the planetarium. These scenes lacked in the VN because it legit started with the MC being in the planetarium already. And that's all for comparison. Let's wrap it up. To sum it up, Planetarian, the Reverie of a Little Planet, is a f***ing great story. And despite its short length, it really gave an emotional and memorable experience. Sasuga desu ne, Key Studio. Though there are some nitpicks here and there, but overall, I think it's a masterpiece. So the Degen score is a strong 9. I highly recommend this short story, especially if you're starting out to read visual novels. And with summer sale in Steam now, there couldn't be a better time. Anyway, that's all from me. Hope you guys can like and subscribe if the content is degenerate enough. Later, gens.